happens is it's primarily equipment. So we have very few miners and lots of equipment, and the coal is then taken out of there and stored in coal cars. These are some of the coal cars. It takes about a mile of coal cars to run a coal-fired plant one day. So you might put that in your notes. 1 mile of coal for 1 day. This is a process diagram for a coal-fired system. I'm going to simplify and talk about one piece at a time. The coal comes in here as big lumps. It gets processed. The processing at this stage is largely simply washing the coal, getting rid of the junk that's on the surface of the coal. That takes out some of the sulfur and some of the dust. Then they essentially have to crush it and convey it into the power system. In the crushing process, they reduce the coal. Instead of being big lumps, it looks just like, it's about the size of face powder. So it's really fine stuff when it finally goes into the boiler. When it goes in, it's blown in, and what happens in the boiler is the coal doesn't really burn, it really explodes. So you get really good combustion there. And then you're getting all this heat from the coal, and what you do is you have some water pipes wrapped around here. Water goes through those pipes, the water gets real hot, goes through these pipes here as steam, and causes these sort of fan blades, just like blowing on a little windmill. The fan blades twirl around, and that's your turbine. Then the steam goes up through here, goes through a cooling system to convert it back to water, then it gets recycled. So you keep on recycling it. And finally, you get electricity generated, goes to various substations for changing its voltage levels and over the transmission lines. Now, one thing you want to keep track of is the ash, because there's a lot of ash associated with coal. A large coal-fired plant takes up about 1,000 acres, so it's not real big. The radiation from a coal plant is larger than that of a nuclear power plant. Most people don't know that, because there's radionuclides in the coal. This is the stuff just belching out. Also, there's mercury coming out of the coal, which is very important. The mercury level in breast milk these days is about 1/6 of the toxic standard. And most of that mercury comes from coal-fired plants. The fly ash we just talked about takes up about 20 acres per year, about 25 feet high. So that can be a real problem. In some places they have the ash stored in slurry ponds, and they recently had some problems about a year or two ago in Tennessee, where the dam of that slurry pond broke, and it essentially ruined a large area for a long time. Okay, that's it for coal. Yes, sir?
What's the idea of clean coal?
The idea of clean coal is mostly a marketing concept. It says that we have this concept called clean coal. You say, well, when are you going to have the clean coal? Well, we have one prototype at the University of XYZ that we're working on right now to make the coal clean. How about storing the CO2? Oh yeah, we're thinking of letting a contract to the University of ABC to study injecting the coal, the CO2 from the coal into the ground. So it's in my opinion, just purely marketing hype. There is no such thing as clean coal. And if we could make clean coal. I mean, you could actually make clean coal if you wanted to. But if you did, it cost a lot of money. And so what would happen is the coal guys would no longer be competitive with the other guys. So I don't think we're ever going to see clean coal. Okay, solar. This is a kind of a cute design here. I like it. It's essentially have a tower, and on the top of the tower you put a picture of a tea kettle. And then you have these mirrors all focused on that tea kettle. So when the tea kettle gets hot, the water in the tea kettle turns to steam, and it works the same way that the whole system works. So essentially you have all these mirrors focusing on this one small area here, and it's getting really hot up there. That's how a solar power tower works. These two are in Spain, and this is about a 20 megawatt system. This is another way of doing it, solar photovoltaics. You can either use these in centralized systems, or you can stack them on your roof. You see a lot of homes in this area with this sort of thing on the roof. This is an example of a photovoltaic system in Germany. This one has 700,000 of those panels that guy was just holding. So it's very heavy in terms of job creation. It makes enough power, 53 megawatts, to power 15,000 households. And it's the size of around 200 football fields. So it's a land use intensive kind of thing. If we decided to run the U.S. on solar power, which we could, we'd have to figure out a way to storage it, but you can store that heat energy I showed you in that first system very easily. You could run the whole country by putting all the power plants in about 40% of Arizona. Now this would not be a very bright thing to do, but the reason it's not too bright is because you could have one cloud come over and essentially shut down the whole system. So a smarter thing to do is to mix and match. Put some in Arizona, some in Nevada, some in California, some in New York, and so forth. Move it around. And it's also good to have a mix. Yes, sir?
Is the supply of silicon that they're going to
Louder, please?
Is the supply of silicon that they're going to interfere with solar production? I've heard that there might be shortages of silicon in the future.
Well, there's never going to be a shortage of silicon because just go to the beach. Okay? You get all you want. The question is, can you grow a single crystal or multiple crystal in silicon? And what happens is places like Applied Materials will be happy to fill whatever orders you have. Just give them a little bit of time to ramp up. There's a question back there somewhere? Okay, good. This gives you some idea of the current installation of solar photovoltaics in the world, the blue curve here. And we're up to around, let's call it 17,000 megawatts of nuclear power. That's equivalent to about 8 San Onofres, just to give you some sort of ballpark. There's a company called First Solar that signed a contract with China to build a 2 gigawatt power plant. That's equivalent to the San Onofre one in China. It's going to be 25 square miles. It'll be done by 2014. That's they'll have 1 gig, half of it done by 2014, the rest by 2019. It'll be the biggest solar installation whenever it's built. So that's really coming along. Okay, that's solar. Nuclear. Here we have San Onofre. Nuclear power, you hear an awful lot about, gee whiz, the world's energy system depends on nuclear power. That's true to some extent. About 2% of the world's electrical power is generated from nukes. So the other 98% is generated from something else. How does the nuclear power work? This is kind of cute. You have a uranium atom, so-called U-235. This U-235 atom is it's a rarer part of uranium. It's about 0.7% of natural uranium. So it gets very excited whenever a neutron walks by. It'd be something like a young guy seeing a nice-looking girl walk by. It's very excited. And what happens is it gets so excited that it breaks up into 2 pieces, and it throws off some more neutrons. So 1 neutron goes in, 2 neutrons come out. What a deal. And you get these pieces left over here, these hunks here, and we call those waste. So that's the waste. So if you pack these things close enough together, each neutron goes and hits another nucleus of U-235, and each of those gives off 2 neutrons. So we had 1 coming in, now we got 2, now we got 4 and 8 and so forth. That's called a fission reaction. Now, if you get that sort of thing going at the right rate, you can take that energy and use it for good purposes. If you have that reaction going very, very fast, you have what's called an atom bomb. Now, if we don't design things right, what will happen is a lot of the neutrons will escape and not hit the other U-235. And so what happens is the thing won't get real hot. We call that a subcritical mass. And if we design it right, what happens is we get to a so-called critical mass where the thing starts to heat up. So we have to figure out some way to get it heating up and not explode. So what we do is in a nuclear reactor, we have our fuel shown here going upwards, and we have things that go down in between the fuel called control rods. Those control rods there are essentially to take care of the neutrons so they don't get to be too many. So again, it's like the Goldilocks principle we talked about yesterday. You know, you don't want too many, you don't want too few, you want just right. So you adjust that with the fuel rods. So what happens is we generate these fuel rods get real hot. They have water in there. The water comes out and goes through a piping system here. And a lot of the water then is put into, converted to steam. Actually, the other way. It's converted to steam. The steam comes out again just like it did for the coal system. And blows the turbine around. We generate electricity. The steam from the turbine comes into another system here where it cools down. It's converted to water. The water is pumped back in again. So that's how a nuclear power plant works. Since the spent fuel is a big deal these days, we'll talk a little bit about spent fuel so we have some idea of how that's working. What happens is, as the fission process works, we end up getting heat out, but we also get waste. So that waste essentially clogs up the system. It prevents the fuel from being efficient. So after about 3 years, you have to take all that fuel out of there and put a new set in because you're not getting much heat out anymore. So it's good for about 3 years. You take these, to make one of these bundles here, what we do is we take a little pellet, U-235 with some other stuff, and we stick it into a long, it looks like a long javelin.